I will say cantering under the circumstances that we're in right now is not fun. Not fun at all.
Well, it's a blessing to those of us who are the beneficiaries of it, Valerie. So thank you for that.
Yes.
Well, thinking about the loss of being able to sing together is maybe a good segue into our class this morning. I think we may have some more folks jump on, and we will welcome them when they come. Patrick and Megan are both on the preschool Zoom meeting, and so they may join us later. We doubt that one will go a full hour, usually doesn't. So welcome you all. We are still in our sermon series about Jesus meeting folks in homes and coming close to them in a variety of situations. And today in worship, we look at Jesus coming close to people in grief. And so our faith formation class today, we are delighted to welcome Ellen Begley, who Ellen is the executive director and the founder of Black Mountain Counseling Center. And what I know about it is a nonprofit center that provides mental health counseling regardless of folks' ability to pay, which is truly a gift, especially right now. From her resume, I know that Ellen's been a school counselor. She's been a nurse in Asheville and in what was then Zaire as a Presbyterian missionary back in the 80s. She's an elder at Black Mountain Presbyterian Church, and we are delighted to welcome you, Ellen. Thank you for spending some time with us today to talk about loss and grief and help us look at all of that. So welcome.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here. The thing that's not on my resume, but it's important to you all, is that I'm Bob White's cousin.
Well, I didn't know that. Bob is the one who introduced us and said, "Oh, we should talk to Ellen," but I did not know you were his cousin. So that's great to know.
Yes, he has all the family history, but we won't get into all that today. Thank you for inviting me to be here.
Great.
It's a pleasure to see familiar faces and names. And some of you might know the Drummonds, and they are my next door neighbors. So I'll wave at them in a few minutes when they get out. But yeah, it's nice to be with you all.
Good. We've developed a few questions that we're going to ask that I'll ask on you all's behalf, and Ellen will respond to those. And then we're gonna do a little breakout room so that folks have a chance to talk at some point in all that, and absolutely have a chance for you all to ask any other questions that come up for you. Grief and loss is something we're all faced with right now and throughout our lives. And so having the opportunity to talk with Ellen and hear from her as a mental health professional, I think is a real gift for us. So Ellen, the first question I want to ask is, what are you noticing in your practice right now about grief and about mental health that's particularly acute during this time, this last year?
Well, I will tell you all that the need has tremendously escalated. We had 28 new client calls in the last 14 days. That's a lot of people that are coming into that need help coming into the practice. And I see that Jeannie's on this call, and she can answer this as well as I can. But I think what we're seeing is that mental health is getting full. Everybody's filled up. We're trying to find spaces for people, and it's really a tough time. The positive of that is that people are reaching out. When people say, "How's your work going?" and I want to say, "Great," but I'm like, is that good? Not good. It is good. It is good that people are reaching out. It's a tough time. It brings things to surface that may have been there all along, and then it brings in new things. So it's escalating. There's a lot of grief a lot of anxiety and a lot of depression and a lot of grief. You know, so many losses this year. Loss of interactions, of course, with family, friends, church, getting to see people in person. It's a huge loss. There's also people who have lost loved ones, both due to the pandemic, but also not due to the pandemic, but can't be there with them, can't have those important memorial times and celebration of life experiences and things that people go to, wedding, you know, vacations. You know, some of us are going on vacations, but it's not the same. And then the changes in just daily routine for a lot of people. And you see that with families. You know, kids aren't getting up and going to school. They're trying to get them on their Zooms. There's just a lot of changes. And with that comes loss and grief over those losses.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm hearing a little echo. I'm gonna mute a couple of you all, and then, you know, you can unmute yourselves when it comes time to talk together. Yeah, just the whole variety of types of loss that everyone is dealing with, it compounds on itself. So that idea that people are other kinds of things that are, you know, maybe further back in someone's story surfacing during the time of acute losses is striking. Talk a little bit more, if you would, about how isolation affects grief. You know, what is it, the role that other people play in helping us navigate loss and grief and mental health? What is isolation doing to us?
Well, grief is a lonely experience anyway, at its core, I think. And not having anyone around to help with that, to just be there, to be that comfort, is hugely painful. We can't reach out and touch someone, literally or figuratively, just to hold someone, to hold their hand, to be there, to be a presence in their space. And without that, there's this dark, deep hole. And it's much harder to climb out of. You know, we don't want to be alone when we're grieving. And yet we have to be alone with isolation. And the grief of not being with someone in their final days, or just the extended grief, not just of the person, but of the extended family, of not getting those chances to come together in hard times, is tough. It's tough.
Yeah, I'm thinking this group knows that. You know, the congregation has experienced loss individually. We've experienced loss, and there are ways that we would have been supporting one another, and have had to try to find other ways to do that. And it's not the same, and it's painful.
And I was thinking, my mantra, if any of you, and I know Bob's heard this from me before, but it takes a village is my mantra. And it takes a village to get through grief. And we need that village. However we can get it, we need that village to walk through the journey of loss and grief.
So if you're meeting with somebody, this is not one of the questions I sent you. If you're meeting with somebody grieving in your practice, you know, I'm assuming you're meeting over Zoom with folks. What are some of the suggestions that you are having people consider about how to grieve well in isolation, or how to care for others who are grieving?
Right. Just more contact, talking to someone by phone, however you can Zoom if it's possible. or going for a walk outside, you know, doing some things, just that contact, just the check-ins are so important. I can't underestimate that. Just calling somebody, checking in on them every day. How you doing? You know, I just think that's really important. And you know, being that listener. And I don't know if I can't remember where the questions go from here, but the grief is something that we don't want to hurry through. And I'll emphasize that more as we go on, I think, but we need to just take it and feel it and let other people feel it. And we can talk more about that, but not trying to hurry through it, but just being there and being a presence for someone who's going through a difficult time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's go ahead and talk more about that idea of not hurrying through grief, but acknowledging it and allowing yourself to feel the feelings. Can you talk a little more about that?
Right. We have a saying in the practice of it's okay to not be okay. You know, I think, and I know I was thinking about this maybe later in some of the other questions, but I was thinking about our society, you know, we Frozen Chosen have a harder time expressing our emotions anyway, but we also want people to be all right. We want everybody to be, we want happiness, you know, and I was thinking about Charlie Brown, Good Grief, right? What is good grief? You know, grief is good. Grief is something we need to experience, and we don't need to rush through it. So it's okay to not be okay. And I think when you're with someone who's grieving, it's good to express that to them. It's okay to feel that. You know, God gave us all these emotions. It's okay to hurt. We need to hurt. We need to feel. And so not rushing through that. You know, I saw somewhere an example of somebody takes their car to the shop with a transmission problem, and the mechanic, instead of fixing the transmission, turns the radio up louder. You know, it's like we've got to feel it. We've got to experience it. And we need to help other people know it's okay to experience that grief, to have those grief attacks. You know, there's no real journey through that except to go through it, through that valley.
Yeah. The phrase grief attack is a helpful one, because my own experience of grief, and I think we'll give you all a chance to talk about some of that yourselves later in the breakout rooms, has been, you know, you never know when it's going to hit you. Standing in line at the grocery store back when we used to do that, just random, you can't predict it. So it does kind of come out of the blue. Yeah. So if I know we're kind of bouncing back and forth between people's own experience of grief and how we as caring friends and as a congregation can care for each other. And that's a little bit like life, you know, we do that. It's us sometimes, and then it's our friends and family. Help us know a little bit more about, as friends of those who are grieving, or as family, you know, what should we be looking out for and paying attention to?
So I think the key is paying attention, that paying attention to, just awareness and listening. You know, we don't have to fix it, and we shouldn't fix it. We shouldn't fix it. I mean, I think it's most important that we listen where people are. Now, there's this whole thing of the 5 stages of grief that, you know, we learned way back, and people think, oh, well, I'll just move through these stages. It doesn't work like that. And, you know, that I don't even know why they're called stages, because I think you move, that'll be another term. You move back and forth between them. So you might be great one day and the next day you have a grief attack and you're a mess, and it might be years later. And you know, that song on the radio spurred something, that hymn that y'all are talking about, you know, your hymn, something, some memory comes back. And so just being present, just listening and being where people are and being comfortable in the space where people are and not trying to move forward too quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want us to have a chance to talk in breakout rooms a little bit. I want to skip to another question. When you think about mental health and especially about grief, how do you see that manifesting differently for different ages? You know,
That's
we're
a
all
really
in,
great question. I was thinking about that as Bob was talking about his grandchildren, school age. You're talking about a college student. You know, it's been interesting to watch how different people move through things like this pandemic and the grief and loss. I was thinking personally, I have a mother-in-law who's 99, and to watch her move through this, it's just like, oh, okay, this is one more thing. You know, she's experienced a lot of things in her life, and she's much more gracious about, okay, we just have to do this, you know, versus, you know, teenagers who are really struggling right now. That's a huge group we're concerned about. But so you have people that may move through it easily because of life experiences that they've been through. I think it's harder on younger folks in a sense, because they don't have the life experience to know that this is something that we can live through. We can get through this, which has been interesting to watch. The older folks that we're dealing with in the practice are lonely. They're just lonely. They've missed their friends, right? Like everybody else. But the ones that we see with a lot more of the anxiety are maybe they're working folks, and suddenly they've lost their jobs and they don't see a way out, and they're really lost. Or the young adults who are struggling with, what am I going to do now? What's the next step? Because they haven't lived through as many things, their adaptability is much less. And so that's a little bit harder. For teenagers, that's a huge concern in mental health right now, partly because of their developmental stage of what they're supposed to be doing in their life right now, which is a lot of peer relationships, you know, self-discoveries, that they've been locked down. And so that's a group that we're very concerned about. Children grieve differently a lot of times than adults. Part of that is their developmental stage. They don't really understand it. The time doesn't really fit for them. So, you know, I think it'll be interesting to see what we see from like elementary age. Some of those are going back now into the classroom and reconnecting. We'll have situations that will be more difficult because of other dynamics, family dynamics and stuff, but having been behind in school and lost and all that, I mean, I think we'll see that. They are much more likely, to me, to bounce and get caught back up with their friends. I think the harder ones are going to be the adolescent and young adults who feel it much more deeply of being kind of lost in who they are and where they're going.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we all can name family and neighbors and friends who are dealing with what this pandemic has placed on us, and everybody's situation is a little bit different. But it's all loss.
Yes.
Yeah. I want to invite y'all, if you would, let's hear from some of you in the chat, if you're able to. What losses are you noticing, either for yourself or for people that are close to you? What is it that that people are grieving? Or who? If you want to write names, what feels like a loss to you right now? If you want to put that in the chat. Jeannie says friends. Yeah, we'll hope to see you too, Jeannie. Thanks for being here. Grandchildren, indeed. Yeah, Kathy not being able to sing with the choir, young grandchildren. Yeah, that we saw those early pictures of people staying away from nursing homes and older folks, and I have this image in my head of somebody with their arms through like a saran wrap hug kind of thing. And we've just that was months and months and months ago, and that those losses kind of compound on them. Cindy says church family sitting in a pew. Kathy's not being able to be with friends who need our help. Yeah, Earl, missing Saturday sanctuary, indeed. Our neighbors and friends there. Thank you for lifting that up, Earl. Valerie lost oldest and best friend over politics. That's a particular kind of loss and grief too. Yeah, Ellen, jump in anytime if you have any thing to add. Our Saturday sanctuary is the ministry that that we were holding on Saturdays, where we opened our fellowship hall and fed our downtown neighbors, and haven't been able to, we've been giving food out to take away, but haven't been able to welcome them in the same way. And that's been a huge loss for our dedicated volunteers and for the downtown neighborhood as well. June, being able to hug Esther, Janet, Martha, missing Lynn, Dick, and John. Thank you for naming them, June.
It's been a tough year. It's going to be interesting. I've talked to my young adult son, who happened to is still here due to the pandemic, of what he's going to think about, 10, 15 years from now. Are we going to be looking at things not quite like 9/11, where you remember where you were because it was an exact moment, but are we going to be saying before the pandemic and after the pandemic? Because I don't think we can all go back to normal. I don't even know what normal is anymore. I don't know that we remember normal, but there's going to be a new normal. And what is that going to look like? Which is interesting to talk about. And I hope that one of the things that comes out of it is that people are more comfortable talking about their loss and their grief and their feelings about all of this. I just think that's so critically important. You're missing your grandchildren. By golly, they're missing you too. I mean, and let's talk about that, how that feels, so that when we move, how do we reconnect? And that's something that I think, Julie, you mentioned to me, is how do you help people to re-engage? And that's its own challenge. It'll be hard for some to do that.
Yeah, there's so much here we need to talk about. kind of like grief, I feel like we can circle around and around it. I mean, we don't like pass through it like, oh, we solved the grief problem in this class or in our lives.
Right.
We just kind of,
Let's move on. No more
Yeah.
grief.
yeah,
Yeah.
let's circle around it. That as vaccines continue to be given out, I think what I'm noticing is people's emotions are kind of all over the place again, like a little bit of hope, and then like, but it's, but I can't get one, or, or it's just more of that. So as we move through the opportunities to maybe start gathering again in different ways, how do we navigate that? How do we start to be able to re-engage? It's kind of like creeping out of grief a little bit and trying to test out that new normal. What are the tools how do we do that?
Well, and I think again, it's individual, it's personal. Different people are going to deal with it differently. Some are so ready to just jump out there, and that's why you're seeing all this, let's go out to dinner, let's take our mask off, let's do all these things, because they're just so desperate to get out. And we have the other side. I mean, we see an increase in social anxiety. How's it going to be to step out? That's one of the things we're seeing a lot with some of the teenagers and young adults who've gotten more comfortable in their Zoom, and now, oh, I have to go outside. I mean, it's like, I have to go back to school. Do I really want to do that? And so you're seeing a lot of individual reactions that are really different. And then we're not there yet, and you hear that. And certainly the media is all over the map. So, how are you supposed to react? I think you have to understand yourself. You have to take some of those good deep breaths and try to think through, where am I in this process? And it's okay to not be okay. And it's okay to take your time figuring it out. And it's okay to not be the same place I am today that I was yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
As we go through this. But also, I think it's really important, as you talk about grief and loss, that you think about the fact that people feel different at different times. And, a lot of people are judgmental about that. Let's move on. Let's just forget it. It's done. And it's not. And for, people have had losses that they need to grieve. It's not over. It's our want to put a Band-Aid on it and fix it kind of mindset. Mm-hmm. But I think as people re-engage, some will re-engage really quickly. And I think some of those have had more social interactions, even by Zoom. So they've been able to talk to friends. They've been able to, communicate. Then there's some that are, and the ones I think that I'm most concerned about are the ones that have kind of hidden. They've kind of shut down. They're going to be the harder ones to re-engage.
Mm-hmm. Do you have, before we send folks to a breakout room, I think one of the things we'll invite you to do in the breakout room is to talk about loss or grief that you might have encountered during this time. But as we do that, in addition to naming some of that with one another, I wonder if folks might want to talk a little bit about what is helping, how are we, what are some of the practical things we can do, because I think they are very individual. So I'm wondering if you can help us name a few things folks might be able to identify as, oh, this is actually helping me survive right now.
Well, it again is very individualized, what people are comfortable with. Some people, it's music, like you've been talking about, hymns, playing those hymns, singing those hymns, even if you sing them out loud in your own space where nobody's hearing you. Music, art, going for walks, getting outside, breathing. We do a lot of breathing work. just taking some good deep breaths and trying to calm. Some people like to journal. I mean, there's a lot of real, simple things that you find your niche. I was watching the news last night. I think it was David Muir, but it's not David Muir on the Weekend. Anyway, whoever that was. And they always do a nice story at the end. That's why I like that show. And they had this woman, and I don't know if any of you saw it, but she had been having cancer, and she sang as she left her treatments, and it showed her singing, and that was what helped her get through it. And I think you find, what is it in your life that brings you some joy and some peace? Is there a friend that you want to talk to every day? Then do it, find that space. But I think there's some real practical things, such as, music, writing, drawing, going for walks, getting outside, especially now that it's getting prettier out. Just doing some very practical meditation and prayer. We work into what we're doing at the center as far as encouraging people to take some time. Just being in that space. I think all of those things help.
Thank you. You all, as I'm looking at you all in this class, you all know some things about this. You are your own teachers in a way. We all have things to share with one another about how we navigate loss and grief. So I'm going to send you to some breakout rooms and give you an opportunity to share with one another. If you're comfortable talking about your own loss and grief, either during this time or in past times, please name that. We could each maybe teach our own class about that. But don't feel you need to go there if it doesn't feel like the right time. But while you do that, are there things that you have learned about navigating loss and grief that have been helpful to you? Because hearing that from one another can help each of us. So I'm going to send you to some breakout rooms and let you spend. I'll put some version of that question in the chat, but spend a little time sharing with one another your own experience of loss and grief and what you have learned about walking through it. We have not really talked about faith yet, and I hope you all will name some of that for one another too. I tried to go there in my sermon appropriately, I think. If you can't talk about the role of faith in navigating loss and grief in a sermon, there's something wrong. So feel free to lift that up too. So let me send you any questions before I do that. All right, let's spend a little time sharing with one another.
To mute again.
Well, welcome back, you all. Thank you for spending some time together. Talking about our loss and our grief is not easy, but I think it's powerful and is one of the tools in our tool belt for navigating it. Are there, I want to invite you to, before I turn back to Ellen with a couple questions, I want to invite you all to reflect what you might have heard or learned from one another. Without telling someone else's story, what have you learned about how to navigate grief from listening to others? Are there practices, and if you want to put those in the chat instead of talking out loud, that's fine. Are there things we've learned? I know I've learned how to navigate my own grief with a group of other people that have experienced a similar loss. I have a writing group that we write together.
I heard something from Bruce that I have never heard before, but it was helpful. He used the term anticipatory grief, and the grieving a loss that you know is coming and grieving it in advance. That was insightful for me.
Thank you.
Julie, one of the things we talked about was the whole difficulty of reentry and what that looks like. And the fact that we've lost some just basic social skills, that we don't drive as much as we used to drive, you know, and all of those things are things that we're going to have to figure out how to navigate.
Indeed. Yeah. So even when we are able to visit with a grieving friend again, we've kind of forgotten how and gotten out of the habit of it. That's an extra hurdle to get over. You're right.
Ellen, adding to what Patrick said about anticipatory grief, there's anticipatory anxiety that goes with that.
Sure.
Mhm.
One thing I mentioned to my group was that church is very important to me with a community of believers and worshipers. It's a place where I can go and be and cry over the griefs and the losses that I have lost. And it happens virtually every Sunday in worship. And because the gospel is preached and there's good news and there's hope. And those dry my tears.
Mm.
Thank you, Earl, for naming that. That good news and hope that we preach is a word to the grieving. That whole story of Jesus. Thank you. Anybody else want to lift up anything from your conversation?
Julie, I too put in writing, which I find to be very helpful, feelings and things that I might not communicate otherwise. But the other day I was thinking about what positive things can I come up with that have resulted from the pandemic issue. And I did come up with about 7 or 8 different things. So sometimes turning it around in a different direction is a helpful way to look at it.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Bob. That would be a good practice for all of us. Ellen, we just have a few more minutes. So, you know, we had more questions to get through, but let's not worry about those. I just want to give you an opportunity for some last thoughts for us, particularly maybe as a person of faith.
Yes.
How that plays a part in your work with people who are grieving.
Yes. You know, I was reading a psalm that I go to sometimes for this, and it's Psalm 102. And if you have the message, it has the title, you know, with each psalm, and the title was "A Prayer of One Whose Life is Falling to Pieces and Who Lets God Know Just How Bad It Is." And I love that. And it starts, you know, God, listen to my prayer. Listen to the pain in my eyes. Don't turn your back on me just when I need you so desperately. Pay attention. This is a cry for help, and hurry. It can't wait. And it goes on. Y'all were talking earlier before we started about birds, and I was thinking that actually is referenced in that psalm as well, about a buzzard in the desert or a sparrow in the gutter, feeling very alone. But at the end, it says, it comes around, kind of like Bob was talking about, it comes around when he attends to the prayer of the wretched, miserable, desolate folks, he won't dismiss their prayer. And I think we can sit with that. You know, God is with us. We're not alone in this journey. And I say that 100 times a day to clients. You know, you're not alone. God is with us. Let's hold each other. Let's spend time. You know, I love the Psalms because you can get really angry about your situation. And I think that's really important. to be angry about this situation. But know that God is with us. We are not alone, and we have each other. It takes a village. We have each other. We can pull each other together. That expression of grief, the time that I was in Africa, and some of you know my brother Frank Dimmock, who is maybe one of your missionaries, but what we have seen is tribes that have wailers, people that come in and they wail, and you think that's really strange. And I said to Frank, what is that about? And he said, oh, it's just, those are people that come and wail, and they allow other people to wail. They open the door for other people to express their grief. And that's so important, to just be a presence and let people feel what they're feeling. But you've also been a village to each other today and expressing ways and things that have helped you with that. And I hope you'll continue to share those feelings and those ideas with each other.
Pardon me, Ellen, what psalm was that?
102.
102, thank you.
Yeah. I pulled it from, I like the message. I pulled it from the message.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ellen, for helping us name some of that, and for ending with a good word of hope and ways we can support one another. I want to invite you all to say thank you to Ellen. I'm going to close this in prayer after we talk about next week, but take a moment if you would and say thank you so much to Ellen.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
We are grateful to you and glad to know about Black Mountain Counseling and the good work that you all do there. Blessings on your
Just
work and ministry.
Keep us all in your prayers.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us, Ellen.
Thank you very much.
Megan, can you give us a heads up for next week, and then I'll close us in a prayer.
Yeah, absolutely. So in our faith formation time, one of the things that we've been doing is we've been concentrating on different components. And so next week we'll be talking about families. And so as Jesus meets with a family in our worship service, that'll be the story that we're concentrating on. And in our faith formation class, we have invited several people to be on a panel. And so what we'll be talking about is how they have experienced Jesus over this past year, and how their faith has been impacted through their time at home. So it'll be an exciting time, and we're excited for the panelists that have agreed to come and share part of their stories with us.
Thank you. Patrick, anything you want to lift up before I pray?
Gratitude for this group. I was with Megan and others in the preschool Zoom before this, and so jumped on here and feel like I've fallen into the deep end of the pool. So it's going to take me a little time to come out.
Patrick jumped on.
So
I
much.
put him in a breakout room for like in 30 seconds.
Bless you all.
Let me close us in prayer. Oh God, we give you thanks for the gift of your love and your grace, and we are grateful for how you connect us with one another. Today, we give you thanks for Ellen and her work and ministry, for the things she brought us today about how we can help one another grieve personally and collectively. We lift up to you people in our hearts and minds who we know are grieving particularly, and ask that you wrap your arms around them, help them know your presence and your peace. Teach us, oh God, what it is we need to know to love and serve one another as your people, as a family of faith. Keep us looking towards the day when we can be together again and worship and praise you together. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks. Thank you, Julie.
Go in peace.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.